If you have a Bible and you find it helpful, please turn in it to two places. You have to put your finger there. John chapter 1 is one of them, and the other is Colossians chapter 3. These are the two places we'll be spending our time today. I'm not one at all that makes New Year's resolutions. Just not. I think they're kind of silly in a way, because I notice a lot of them come attached to exercise equipment. And that exercise equipment then becomes dusty and dilapidated as it sits in the corner where it's never used after the resolution was made to use the exercise equipment. We all have pieces of articles of furniture like that in our homes, pretty much. But I think for us as believers, one of the pitfalls of new is that we begin to look at things in a way that really isn't real. We tend to latch onto the extraordinary, and we forget that God has called us to live intentionally in this world, in the ordinary, and to find Him operant in the ordinary. That really is a harder thing to do. So let's take a look at these two passages, and you'll just have to hang with me. I know this is going to seem a little obscure to most of you who are here today, maybe all of you, but try to hang with me today. We're going to look at John chapter 1. I'm going to just read the first 3 verses of that chapter. Some of the most profound words in all of the Bible. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. All things were created by Him. And apart from Him, not one thing was created that has been created. Now this passage is... it's one of the passages that's a key to everything else we believe. It tells us that God is. It also tells us there's something about Jesus in being God in the flesh that is, I don't even know how to describe it as to what it really means, other than to say it just is. And this is who Jesus is. But there's a sense in which you see God making a connection here. In the Jewish writings, this word logos in Greek is the mamra. That is, it's God's wisdom. In other words, yes, the Word is God because it's God's mind. It's who God is. Everything that God did, think about it, all of the creation, He spoke into existence. There's no mechanical operation there. That's why the Bible speaks of this in terms of the Word becoming flesh, God's mind itself becoming incarnate in a person. And there's a huge connection here for us as human beings. Once God had created the universe and then He put people in the world, however you want to see the mechanics of that worked out, doesn't matter to me. He began then to speak propositionally to the people. He gave them things to do. He said, you're to keep the garden. You're to be fruitful and multiply. This is your place. I'm giving you the whole world. You're there to keep it. So there was work. He gave them beauty. The Bible says that the fruit of the trees was not only good to eat, but it was pretty to look at. So there were aesthetics. There were things in the world that were just nice because they're nice. Sunsets and flowers and animals and all those things. Then there was curiosity, that the humans were given to have a curious nature. God set Adam forth and He said, okay, I'm going to pass all the animals in front of you. I want you to name every one of them. Whatever Adam named them, that's what they were. So you had the science of taxonomy. That's all taxonomy is, the naming of things. Then you had family, where God says that the first time God says it's not good. He says it's not good that Adam's alone. The Adam needs a partner. So in the beginning, God created the Adam, male and female. So He instituted what we would look at as family. And part of our problem today in the world is that people look at human beings as just material objects. That is, just matter in motion. And none of these aspects of humanity are material things. They're all immaterial things. The fact that we're curious is an immaterial quality. The fact that we love family is an immaterial quality. So there's a lot more to the universe than just a material object would give to us. I'll never forget, I was a believer when it happened, And there was, if you've never seen it, you should pull up on your phone the Hubble Deep Field image. There's an image where it's hard to explain because we don't realize when we look up at the sky, we see the sky, but when you focus a powerful telescope at the sky, you're focusing on a pinprick. It's a tiny little section of the sky. Well, imagine the space telescope outside the atmosphere, hugely powerful, can reach many, many light years out and render images that we can't find on the Earth in any way. So they focused it on a place in the sky where the Hubble saw nothing. Blank, black, nothing. And they said, we're going to leave it there for several days. They can do that. They can orient the telescope and have it focus on a spot, stationary on that spot for days. When they got the image back, there were 2,500 galaxies in the image. Now just imagine what that means about that was a huge watershed moment in all of astrophysics where all of a sudden there is no blank sky. It's full, even beyond what we can see, of galaxies, each one with billions of planets and stars. When you look at all that, and then you look at us, I remember Carl Sagan took this photograph, rendered a photograph from one of the Voyager trips, and it's called the Little Blue Dot. It's where Voyager's camera was turned back toward the Earth, and there was the Earth and the other planets arranged, and there was this tiny little blue speck. He said, that's the Earth. So we literally are a speck of dust in a vast galaxy. But think about this for just a moment. You and I look out at the beauty in the galaxy. It doesn't look back at us. Nothing in the physical world appreciates you and me. That says something awfully significant about who we are in God's sight. That we have the capacity to appreciate the beauty of the world, but it does not appreciate us. It's not conscious of it. It's a non-living thing. That's extraordinary to me. And that tells me that you and I are here on this earth as image bearers. We've got this image of God in us. All the curiosity, family, everything about us that we think of that makes us human is also part of who God is. He's planted it in us. So our lives have significance that goes way beyond the material world. We mourn people like Tristan, who has died, because we recognize something in Tristan that goes way beyond the material, way beyond anything that we can express in just matter in motion. And our appreciation of these things is exactly like God. That's part of God's image in us. All the grandeur is underneath you and me. This whole universe is, at least this pocket of it, is intended by God for us. That's pretty remarkable. So what does this mean to us as we walk in this world into just the mundane day-to-day affairs? Well, one thing it shows me is pleasure. I look at things like a song sung or an instrument played or the beauty of a sunset, and there's a pointer there that says, God likes this stuff too. I like it, you like it because God likes it. But it's incomplete. Every time I hear the song that I think to myself, this always lifts me into a place I can't even describe because I'm thinking about God in a way I can't bring words to it. It comes and it goes. Just like Christmas came and went. You know, it passes. And then the moments of normative living flood back in. We want something more, right? We want it to just go on. I want that sublime feeling that I get from a song or an instrument played or a book read or a piece of poetry, whatever it is, a sunset. I want it to just go on forever. I want the feeling of Christmas and family and friends and laughter and food and all that to just go on, but it doesn't go on. It always comes to a stop. Think about a little kid. You know, what do little kids do? All right, you take them to the beach, which for when you're 3 years old, you've never been to the beach, and you go to the beach for the first time, it's just a wonder. Look at that sand. You know, can I eat the sand? Is there something about the sand that's significant? Look at the shell. Can I eat the shell? Of course, a lot of these features we don't really appreciate as adults because we see what's going to happen if they do eat it. But Still, it's a wonder. Everything's a wonder. A bird flies by, a bird lights, and a little kid runs after the bird like, I want to go see this thing. Everything is just a point of wonderment. And what happens when the day comes to an end? They don't want to go to sleep.
No.
They don't want to go to bed because it's a wonder to be awake and to live and to see all these things. But for you and for me, once we've been on this earth for a while, the ordinary and the mundane take over and become mostly what our lives are composed of. I mean, let's just think for a minute. What else would there be in life beyond, say, the relational or the financial or the employment or the health? What else really is there? These are the features of normative living. And so my question for us is, why would we not see these places as the places where God works, as opposed to the extraordinary or the thing that's supposed to be out there that we're seeking? Some kind of feeling or some kind of emotional content that's going to lift us away from the ordinary. Isn't that weird? We go on vacation. I think that's just so weird. I mean, we want to go to an unspoiled place, but we want to live in a spoiled place somehow. Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought this, and I've probably never said this here that I can remember, but it's been a thought of mine since I was in my teenage years. I really believe I was supposed to be born in another century, when everything was very earthy and simple, when there weren't telephones and internet and TV and everything else, because then the focus would be on the simple. You look back in history and you see the way the church was orchestrated before there were all those things. Church and your life with God was kind of the focus of your life. But because we've got so much, now it's not any longer the focus of our life. It's become lots of other things. And then it makes me think of the fact of the grandeur, the fact of the way God brings us these pleasures, these things to enjoy that all really point to Him. There's a part of that too that becomes kind of tainted and difficult for us in that. And as believers, we want this. We want that extraordinary moment with God. We want to see something fantastic. We want to see God do something utterly amazing. It's kind of like my expectations for Christmas this year. I was looking forward to the family and the friends and the laughter and the food, and none of that happened. I mean, the food was there. We did eat the food. But the rest of it didn't happen because of COVID. So that brings me to Colossians chapter 3. And if you don't mind, I hate to do Bible drills. I rarely have more than one text, but I am today. So if you would, turn to chapter 3 in Colossians. I'll just read 2 verses. Paul says to the church at Colossae in verse 23 of chapter 3, whatever you're doing, work at it with enthusiasm as to the Lord and not as to people, because you know that you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. So serve the Lord Christ. We humans have a tendency to layer everything. We layer stuff. This person's calling is greater than this person's calling. This person has a whatever, you pick it, is greater than this person's calling as a whatever, you pick it. And we stratify those things. We tend to see things that way. We think of people who have a culturally meritorious life, like an artist or a great public orator, or somebody who makes a lot of money, or somebody who creates great art in music or whatever their field. We look at them and we begin to esteem these things. I mean, I don't mean to pick at anything, but just think. I mean, if I said the words, if I named the name Celine Dion, right? And just reminded me, everybody in the room would know who I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But how is Celine Dion different from any of us in this room in God's sight? You see, the God of the Bible takes a very different view of humanity. He says to the church at Corinth through Paul, I'm going to take the things that are not and bring to nothing the things that are. That tells me something about us. It tells me that we're one body as believers, but that we're differentiated. We're all called to different things with different gifts. And in the practical realm, That's the hardest realm we live in, wherein we have to express ourselves as believers. It's the hardest place. The mundane, the ordinary. It's easy to forget that we're called there. Easy to forget. Think of anything that happens in your life relationally with somebody you're really close to. A mom, a dad, a sister, a brother, whoever. A spouse. Where's the easiest place to forget to be fragrant to other people? It's always in the people that are close to us.
Yeah.
Always. That's the easiest place to forget that we're called to be something for Jesus' sake here on this earth. I mean, think about it like this. If maybe you're praying for somebody, and in prayer time, maybe they're in the room with you. And during that prayer time, you think, I need to go over and speak to this person about something. My encouragement would be, do it. Don't wait for something extraordinary. There may be something that you're going to do in that moment that God's calling you to do that will be extraordinary for that person, even though it seems very mundane. I'll never forget. We're so guilty of getting wrapped up in the mundane and forgetting the weightier matters. Remember, Jesus stands in front of that Pharisee. Pharisee talks about all the good stuff they're doing. We tied the mint and the... Imagine being a Pharisee where you go to put salt or whatever, cumin, on your food, and before you do, you take the amount that you're going to put on the food and you separate a tenth of it out and scrape it off to the edge of the table as an offering to God. Imagine doing that in every field of your living, that everything you do. I don't even know how you do that. What do you do if you're on the cell phone and you want to watch a video? How do you scrape a tenth of that off and give it to God? I don't even know how you do that. Just imagine living in that kind of world where every little thing, your water, your Coca-Cola, your coffee, whatever it is you're doing, you've got to take a tenth of that and set it aside somehow to be circumspect, be careful in how you live before God. But then Jesus says, but you forgot the weightier stuff. You forgot the justice and the mercy. Do all these other things if you want, but don't forget that. I'll never forget, I was eating in a home with somebody in New Jersey who invited me into their home for dinner. When I was traveling with the two bands I traveled with, if somebody invited me for dinner, I was there because we didn't know when we might eat, on what we were being paid. So I got invited to the meal. I said, yes, sir, I'll be there. Thank you for inviting me. Well, I sat down at the table, and the woman, the wife, they had a small child who was in a crib standing next to the table. And you know how they do when they're in a crib in jail. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen, that kind of deal. So the wife is back and two serving the meal. And she brings his plate. The husband sets the plate in front of him. She brings plate and sets it in front of me. And I'm just sitting there. I'm thinking, well, she's going to sit down in just a minute. The husband's back is turned to the wife in the kitchen. And she's going back and two. And all of a sudden I noticed he bowed his head and he started, I knew what he was doing. He was thanking God for the food. Well, his wife couldn't see any of that. She's just serving the food. She's involved in the mundane, right? And all of a sudden, she's talking to him in this moment. And all of a sudden, this voice, it was like an out-of-body experience. I know that it's like those cartoons, where the cartoon character is so frightened that the skeleton jumps out and leaves the cartoon character behind. That's what it felt like. This guy just screamed at the top of his lungs, I'm praying! Because his wife was trying to talk to him. He forgot to be fragrant in that moment. The moment of I'm speaking to God became a moment that became an excuse to no longer be fragrant in the mundane for him. And we're all guilty of that. We get caught up in the moments of living that are just ordinary and mundane, and we forget that we're called to be salt and light everywhere, all the time. It's so easy to do. So easy. I ask Becky, she'll tell you Rip does it a lot. I love what little children do. I remember when I was a kid, I was one once, and my favorite thing to do, we used to play Star Trek. That's what we did. We played Star Trek. Everybody had a character. I'm not going to tell you who my character was. I'm not going to tell you. But I had it. That's it. And so my grandfather and my father had built this little playhouse in our backyard. That was the enterprise. That was where and then we would leave it and beam ourselves to where they were building the new high school. And so that was like a alien world, and all the bricks and everything, little places we could hide in, and so much fun. Well, what do kids do when they're pretending like that? What's happening there? It's not just a game. They are learning to be adults. They're pretending to be an adult, right? Captain Kirk and Scotty and Spock and all those guys were full-grown people. Uhura, my sister was Uhura. And so those people are all fully grown. So we're pretending to be adults. We're learning to be an adult in much of that play. Well, let me just ask you a question. C.S. Lewis makes the point. He says, what if some of our being salt and light is to pretend to be salt and light? Not to lie, don't misunderstand me, but to really place ourselves in the role of being salt and light. In other words, to intention ourselves into being salt and light, even though we don't want to be. There's a lesson there. These opportunities come to us to be salt and light when it's really, really hard. And the trials that come along with all that mundane stuff, a flat tire, the car door lock won't open, or I forgot my whatever when I got to work or wherever I had to be that day. All those things. Or can't get the iPhone to work and bring up the song, right? Or the microphone thing falls out. I mean, this is what life is about. These are the things that happen in everyday living. So when they come along, how intentional are we in terms of saying, you know what? God wants me to be salt and light here too. Even though I'm so aggravated that if somebody's near me, I could hit them and it would feel good to do that. Mm-hmm. Think of the hardest thing you can think of in your life. The hardest thing you might face. I mean the hardest, the most difficult, the most painful. The place wherein it makes real good sense to say, I just got to be who I am. Think of that spot. Those are the spots where God calls us to be salt and light. Do you know what the word for witness is in the New Testament? Martyrion. You know what word we get from that?
Martyr.
Martyr. Martyr. So when those moments come in this fallen world, and they will, am I willing to set myself aside and intend, even pretend, to be a martyr for Jesus in that moment, for His sake? I don't know where everybody is today, but if there's anything I've said, you got a question for me, you want to pray with me, I'll stay here as long as it takes as we close. Thank you for your attention.